Afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you all, if virtually, to the Rockefeller Institute of Government. My name is Leigh Wedenoja. I'm an economist by training and senior policy analyst here at the Institute. Today's webinar, Navigating Benefits and Employment, is part of a larger series of webinars, discussions, forums, and reports delving into the relationship between benefits eligibility and employment choices of people with disabilities in New York. This series is sponsored by NYSID and the New York Alliance for Inclusion and Innovation. The Rockefeller Institute has a long history of research into the employment of people with disabilities in New York, as well as the employment of the direct support professionals who work with them. In addition to thanking today's panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment, I would like to thank Maureen O'Brien, President and CEO of NYSID, and Michael Seawriter, President and CEO of the New York Alliance, for this opportunity to work on this research project. In addition to the forum series, we released a policy brief yesterday called Navigating the Benefits Cliff, which walks through the eligibility rules, work incentives, and work disincentives of a handful of social safety net programs for people with disabilities. So before I jump into the meat of the webinar, a few housekeeping notes. This webinar will be recorded and available on the Institute's YouTube channel, as well as our website, for anyone who's unable to attend live and anyone you want to share this with later. Our four speakers will be followed by a shared Q&A. So if you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A tool on Zoom. That's generally in your bottom panel. And we'll follow up with those questions live. In addition to today's webinar, we have two more this year. November 13th, the cost of paperwork, will focus on the administrative burden of benefit application and maintenance, and December 1st webinar, Employment Support and the Information Ecosystem for Individuals with Disabilities, will focus on how information about benefits, work, eligibility for either is transmitted to people with disabilities and their families, as well as the role that support professionals play in that process. In 2019, the last year before COVID disproportionately affected the employment of people with disabilities, there were 1.1 million working age adults with disabilities in New York State. In that year, only 39% of adults with a disability participated in the workforce, which is half the rate of their peers. For New Yorkers in the labor market, those with disabilities were nearly 3 times as likely to be unemployed, 17% less likely to work full-time, and more than twice as likely to earn below the poverty rate. For those with full-time employment, New Yorkers with disabilities earned 15% less. People with disabilities face many different barriers to work, and the barrier we'll be discussing today is specifically the eligibility rules for and information about social safety net programs, which can limit the income and assets people who use these programs are permitted to have. A disincentive to work can exist when losing benefits from working too many hours or too much can result in fewer total resources for the household. Benefits eligibility and the effect of work on that eligibility can be incredibly complicated. Benefits programs, including supplemental security income, SSI, Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, formerly called food stamps, and Section 8 housing choice vouchers, among many other support programs, all have different income and asset limits, can have overlapping eligibility and categorical eligibility requirements, as well as complicated application processes and long wait lists. And as if the benefits rules themselves were not already complicated, people with disabilities and their families confront a substantial amount of missing information and even misinformation on benefits eligibility and earning limits. A cursory look at SSI benefit rules, for example, shows that people who earn above $1,470 per month would not qualify for cash benefits. However, that's not necessarily true. There are a number of income and asset exclusions and programs that support income for working people with disabilities, including Ticket to Work, the Plan to Achieve Self-Support or PASS program, impairment-related work expense exclusions, all of which provide pathways for people with disabilities to earn more than the monthly limit while maintaining their benefits. In addition, ABLE accounts, special needs trusts, and other savings vehicles can be used to allow for asset accumulation beyond asset limits. If that wasn't complicated enough, further, access to healthcare through Medicaid is often protected by the Medicaid buy-in program for working people with disabilities, which protects Medicaid for people with disabilities earning up to about $74,000. Despite these valuable programs, the complexity means that they can only be successful and increase employment if people are aware they exist, receive accurate information about them, and understand how to use them. So within that context, today we're going to talk to 4 different people who have very different and overlapping perspectives in their work, helping people navigate the benefits landscape and to generally work and lead successful, happy lives as people with disabilities. So without further ado or any more undue statistics, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Elizabeth Cox, Lead Independent Living Specialist at Southern Adirondack Independent Living. Elizabeth works to empower people with disabilities to live more independent lives through navigating both services and daily life. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth. Why don't we start by hearing a little bit more about the work that you do generally at SAIL?
Thank you so much for having me. So, like you said, I'm the lead independent living specialist at SAIL. SAIL offers a variety of services, but specifically my department, we assist with benefit navigation. So we do assist people with applying for the Social Security benefits right from that first initial filing, either online or on paper, all the way through till it gets till if they have to go in front of a lawyer. And then after someone receives benefits, we help explain to them what those benefits mean, what and how working impacts those benefits. As an independent living specialist, we also assist with things such as independent living skills. So anywhere from budgeting to learning how to run a washer and dryer to computer skills, we can assist people with. And then we also assist with paperwork, school transfers, you name it, we probably can assist. And then SAIL as a whole, we assist with like durable medical equipment, obtaining health insurance, home health aides. We do a lot in the community.
So first is just sort of table setting. Can you talk a little bit about what the process is like for applying to especially SSI and SSDI and what types of people those programs are intended for?
So Social Security disability insurance is intended for people who were once working, but no longer can due to their medical conditions. Typically you'll hear someone say, oh, they need 40 work credits in order to qualify. However, I recently have just learned myself that it's actually proportional to your age. So of course, someone who's 24 isn't going to have 10 years of work history, 10 years of strong work history. So Social Security actually does make the accommodation that they will only need to have a certain amount of work credits in order to qualify, where supplemental security income is for people who either do not have those work credits or were never given the chance to enter into the workforce due to their medical conditions. In regards to what information they're going to need, I encourage people to kind of approach the application in a holistic manner, meaning that I don't like to know just about like the 1 or 2 big conditions that someone has. I like to know about everything that's going on with them. So I tell people mental, physical, underlying. I like to know about every single diagnosis that you have, so we put our best foot forward on the application. And then I like to learn about every doctor that they've seen related to every single condition. I tend to tell people in the past 5 years, I know Social Security doesn't really like to look back further than that, but I do encourage people to go back into their history if there was something big that happened prior to 5 years, but to give them a window, I say 5. And then after that, any current medication, any relevant imaging or testing that they've had done related to their conditions. And then the final portion is employment history. Employment history is either going to be 15 years or 5 most recent jobs, whichever the person hits first.
So what do your clients, is that the word you would use?
Oh, we use consumers.
Consumers. So what would your consumers, so your consumers need to have their disability documented in order to qualify. What else do they need in order to successfully complete an SSI or an SSDI application?
So they need to have a stable mailing address. That is very important, and a stable phone number in order to apply. Social Security can be very strict when reaching out, and if something is returned, they will turn it the application down if they're not able to get in touch with the person or if mail is returned. But the person will also need to be active in the application after filing. So keeping their doctors aware that they've filed, keeping in contact with the healthcare system and myself, as well as completing any additional forms or paperwork and attending appointments that Social Security sends to them. It's a very passive application until it isn't, and then Social Security says jump and the person has to do it.
And in order to maintain these benefits, what's the process?
In order to maintain either SSI or Social Security benefits, the person really needs to keep Social Security aware of any changes that may happen to them. So address change, marital status change, and especially, as we all know, employment status change. The person can update Social Security in various ways: phone call, faxing, reporting online, or stopping into the local office. But also it's learning about, like keeping bank accounts active and everything, just making sure everything is up to date and active for the application and receiving benefits thereafter.
So we've covered the application process. So what happens as someone moves through their career, earns more, takes on more hours, gets a raise? What does that process look like when both updating the Social Security Administration, but also potentially making the choice to forego cash benefits for earned income?
So keeping Social Security involved and aware is two separate ways to do it. First, it is that monthly reporting of income. So by the 5th of the following month, so money earned in November needs to be reported by December 5th. Social Security will also mail them what's called a work activity report, which is very imperative to continue to receiving benefits. On that work activity report, the person will review their responsibilities, if they are a supervisor, if they received any promotions or changes. And so they could tell Social Security about responsibility changes. And also if they are looking to get off of cash benefits and engage in that ticket to work program and trial work period, they'll have to report their earnings, be aware of that substantial gainful activity figure, be aware of their trial work months, the extended period of eligibility. It's not just working for 9 months and poof, your benefits are gone. It is a 60-month time frame where the person needs to really be engaged with Social Security and be aware, if you take a vacation here or reduce your responsibilities or reduce your work hours, you could go from receiving benefits to not then receiving them the following month.
Now, do you find that your consumers generally aren't aware of that 60-month period? Do they believe it's that only that 9 months? So it is. So for our listeners who don't know, so you have basically 9 months where if you make over the threshold, it sort of proves to the Social Security Administration that you can earn sustainable gainful activity? Substantial gainful activity. But what is this 60-month period?
So the 60-month period is called the trial work period, where in that 60-month rolling period, you have 9 trial work months where you can work and earn as much as you want and maintain your cash Social Security disability benefits, not SSI. This has absolutely nothing to do with SSI. In those 9 months, they do not have to be consecutive. You work, earn, report your wages, and you're good to go. After those 9 months, you enter into what's called the extended period of eligibility, where as long as you worked and maintained wages under that substantial gainful activity figure, you would keep your disability benefits. In the EPE, if you were 1 month to earn more than SGA, your benefits would go away. However, they could restart if the following month or so you went back under that substantial gainful activity figure. Along with the extended period of eligibility and expedited reinstatement period, the trial work period also does provide protections such as the waiving continuing disability reviews. So someone would not have to go to the independent medical examiner to prove that they are still disabled under Social Security's rules.
So basically it provides some protection if people are moving forward in their careers, trying new things, working more, that if it does end up not being successful or not being the right move for them, there is sort of a backstop to make sure that they don't have to go through that arduous reapplication process they did initially.
Yes, because there is Social Security, and that also does provide the expedited reinstatement period where Social Security will look at the person's previous conditions and potentially new and make a new determination, and the person may not have to go through that arduous reapplication process.
From your experience walking people through this process, what do you think is there misinformation? Are there programs that people just routinely don't know about, or do you often hear the wrong thing over and over and over again? And if so, what is it? Like, what should we really be aware of?
So I always hear the figure, oh, I was told I can work 20 hours a week. 20 hours is a good figure for someone to kind of keep in the back of their head, but it is substantial gainful activity unless you are self-employed, because self-employed is an amount of hours you work. It is an amount. So it's not that the person can work 20 hours a week. It is that they have to stay under that 1470 figure. And depending on how much you make an hour is how much you can work in a week. So there's a lot of that misinformation there. And a lot of people just genuinely don't know about any of these protections or any of these rules. So they have worked for, 2, 3, 4, 10 years and may have never reported their wages, may have no idea about the trial work period and the trial work months. So then it's our job to go through their past and figure out all of these things.
And we should establish that this 1,400 something figure is federal, which means that when you talk about that 20 hours in New York, where a minimum wage is about $15 an hour, you're going to be able to work a very different amount of hours than in, for instance, Georgia, where the minimum wage is $7.25, which is at the federal minimum wage. So the hours determination is really deterministic in New York because we're a little bit out of step. Elizabeth, do you have any final thoughts? Anything I didn't ask that you'd like to cover?
No, just that unfortunately, a lot of times Social Security doesn't make a lot of this information as easily as accessible as it should. So I always encourage people who are receiving SSI or disability benefits to always reach out to a local independent living center or a local agency that is here to help them understand these benefits. And hopefully, we can meet them right when they are interested in getting back into the career field, so we can help them navigate their benefits right from the start of the trial work period rather than years down the line. But no, that's it.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much. And next, I'd like to introduce Kellie Roe. Kellie is the Executive Director of Second Chances Opportunities, which provides housing, employment, and support services for people in recovery from substance use disorder. Welcome, Kellie. Why don't we begin with hearing a little bit about you and the work that you and SCO do?
So we work with people who are in recovery from substance use disorder. That is the disability that they work with. We're also members of NYSID. So through NYSID, we get janitorial contracts, which allows us to provide meaningful employment to people in early recovery. And then as the employment goes on, they grow in their own recovery, and it's a space where people can put the pieces of their life back together. Our employees make the prevailing wage, which in the county, it's dictated by county. In Albany County right now, that wage is $20.60 an hour. So it's really quite a bit of money for them to have the ability to save, get health insurance, come off a DSS, and move forward with their life.
So you have because of the population that you work with, most of your clients do not qualify for SSI or SSDI, which is the programs we were discussing before. And the access to benefits that you guys seem to be focused most on is access to healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, in recovery and coming out of treatment. Can you talk a little bit about managing that transition of benefits as people move from, for instance, inpatient or outpatient treatment into living in the community and finding work?
Absolutely. So it's not great. So if you're a person who's going into treatment and you don't have any medical benefits, or you're not even connected to the Medicare system in your county that you're located in, usually your treatment provider will help you get connected, especially if it's residential treatment. If you're going into a 30-day rehab, we have a program that we're part of called CHAMP, which we help people overcome insurance barriers in order to get them into treatment. So we might connect them to their local Department of Social Services so they can apply, so they can get into the 30-day rehab. But if you go from a 30-day rehab into a longer time of care, once you're at the end of your treatment, your treatment provider is going to say to you, okay, Kellie, you've done a great job. You're going through our program. You've been here for about 4 months. In 30 days, you're going to graduate and you have to get a job and an apartment, and you're going to lose your benefits. So it's really an issue. So we happen to also have housing here in the city of Albany. We don't take a security deposit in our housing because people don't have a security deposit. There's literally no way for somebody in 30 days to get a job because you're still in treatment. So the time that you can leave your treatment provider and go out into the world and work is limited. They may tell you you can't work an evening shift, which primarily in janitorial work, they're evening shifts. So there's no way that you're going to get a job and save for a security deposit and 1 month's rent, at least in the city of Albany, and be able to leave your treatment provider and then go out into the world. So what we do is, while somebody is still in treatment, we put them on a janitorial contract for 2 weeks. We see how they're doing, how they're negotiating, their transition back into the workforce. And then we put them up for housing. And if we have a spot, then they're able to come and transition right into our housing, which makes them able to do that because we're not taking any money up front. And we're also providing everything. We're providing all of the furniture. We pay for all of the heat, the water. So somebody's literally coming with their suitcase. And if they need personal care items, we provide all of that stuff. We'll also provide somebody, like we have a few people who get jobs at Albany Met, but they don't have any clothes that are appropriate for a job at Albany Met. So we might take them clothes shopping. We're not taking them to Bergdorf's or anything, but we're just getting them some basic clothing that they can start their job at.
So in some ways,
I'm sorry.
Sorry. So in some ways, your clients seem to have the opposite barrier to employment as Elizabeth's, rather than being sort of limited in the amount of hours they can work based on benefit eligibility. You have this issue where the lack of a benefits transition necessitates working immediately, but also does not foster a way to transition easily into work. You mentioned that, 30 days, which is a very short time. And I think your support system enabled for that transition is an incredibly valuable step in for where we lose these sort of federal programs.
Yes, that 100%. But I will say this. So substance use disorder is a disease of the brain, right? We know that. But by putting people who have now successfully gone through this whole treatment process and they're in a great spot, we're almost terrorizing them with the threat of them being cut off from all of their benefits immediately. So since this is a policy discussion, I'll put my advocacy hat on and say, if the system could allow even 90 days for a transition period for people to be able to hold on to their health insurance, hold on to their food stamps or whatever, so they can, be eligible for the insurance that we provide as an employer. They're not eligible up until 90 days. But I think it would eliminate a lot of fear and anxiety, which is just not good for substance use disorder people in recovery.
I think that makes sense. Can you talk a little bit about your support services beyond housing and employment? I know that you end up doing a lot of administrative work with your clients, helping them figure out how to navigate life after treatment or in recovery. And what have you seen in the benefits application process for your clients? Are there sort of common threads of programs that people are applying to using? And how do you help them navigate that? I know we've talked quite a bit about how many people come to you without even a driver's license or a state ID of any sort.
Yes. Well, we that's what I was going to talk about. Getting their social security card, getting a copy of their birth certificate, getting a copy of the driver's license. So normally, not normally, but in a lot of cases in active addiction, we've lost those documents, or they've expired, or they got left with the last apartment. So treatment providers really don't do those things. Although I will say some of them have begun doing those things, but it's difficult. It's overwhelming. They're not sure, where to go or how to go about that. Getting the birth certificate is generally difficult. It feels, again, it's all of that overwhelming terror of I'm starting my life all over again. And, how do I do that? So our coaches really we hold people's hands right through that process. Some people have to pay off their fines to get their driver's licenses back, or they might be from another state, so they have to reapply here. And, it's just walking people through that process as gently as possible.
Great. Kellie, is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like everyone to know?
We should be kinder to people. We should make the whole process just kinder. I think that people who are on the public assistance and SSD and SSDI are afraid. They're clearly not well, or they wouldn't be in this system. And I think the system could be made easier.
Mm-hmm. I agree. As someone who has had trouble figuring out all these programs and has a doctorate in economics, if I'm having trouble with this, it's going to be incredibly difficult for anyone other than a professional to navigate. And I think that is really shown up in this conversation, is there are a lot more pieces of this than you would see at first glance. So Kellie, thank you so much for joining us. It's always nice to see you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'd now like to welcome BJ Stasio, Co-Vice President of the Self-Advocacy Association of New York State. In addition to that role, Stasio has been employed by the New York State Office for People with Developmental Disabilities, OPWDD, for 20 years, and is working on person-centered planning, voting issues, very apropos, Election Day is on Tuesday, and self-determination training and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let's start the discussion off by hearing more about you and your work with the Self-Advocacy Association.
I work with the Self-Advocacy Association. It's an honor to be a part of a long-standing organization which helps people learn to advocate and speak up for themselves and for others. And probably one of the biggest barriers even before COVID was educating people about their benefits. And because, when you have people who are supposed to support you, such as going from MSC, which is Medicaid Service Coordination, to Care Coordination Organization, those people are supposed to help you navigate the systems that support us. So it's kind of our job at Sandy's is not to influence policy, but to educate better so they can make informed choices for themselves.
Do you find that there are systematic pieces of misinformation or missing information that you find need to be corrected on a regular basis?
Well, I think what needs to be corrected in all the documents, we have to remember that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities which SANES members have mostly. They have intellectual and developmental disabilities, that you need to have the documents in an easy read and understandable form instead of all the jargon that they use. Like, we live in a world of alphabet soup, all of us do, and it gets confusing trying to follow as the alphabet changes.
Now, a lot of these eligibility rules are determined by the federal government, as the major cash benefits programs are run through the Social Security Administration. However, New York plays a substantial role in supporting employment for people with disabilities. Can you talk a little bit about the space you think that New York policy has to make this system easier to navigate or more effective?
Well, I think when systems are put in place, like the employability that OPWDD has, the employability project that OPWDD has, it's the perception of society that, oh, a person with a disability can't do the job, but we'll just give them an interview, which isn't really a fair shot at a job. It's not just going for an interview, it's being treated as a human being. As I always like to say, my disability doesn't define me, it enhances my humanness.
I think that's a fair statement. Can you talk a little bit about that OPWDD program? I'm not sure everyone's aware of.
Well, it's basically to connect employers who want to hire people with disabilities with the people who want to work. That's what that is. That's what that is, and that's a great program. But like I said, it's societal perception, because so many times when I talk to advocates within SANES and those who are just coming in, there's a fear of losing those benefits. But as I tell them, in my 20 years of employment, I took a couple risks when I decided to go to work. I took a risk of wanting to work and wanting to make a difference and wanting to just be visible and be seen, to then deciding to get married, which threw a wrench in the benefits piece for me.
Yeah, that's something that we haven't talked about yet. Could you talk a little bit about how we talked about the disincentive to work that's created by benefits, but there's also a disincentive to get married, to share household expenses. All of these programs are affected by who you live with and who you are legally connected to. What happened? What is the process of getting married? How much does that affect benefits for folks?
Well, luckily for me, when I decided to ask my now wife of 16 years to marry me, I had a plan in my head to use the resources that were available to me. Not only my Western New York Independent Living Center, but being an employee of OPWDD, I had access to the benefits and entitlement crew from OPWDD. So when I had a question, I would talk to them and they would teach me what I need to know about benefits. And I discovered there was such a thing in New York State as spousal refusal, which meant my spouse wouldn't be responsible for any of my medical expenses if she said she couldn't, and that was a relief for both of us. And it kind of set up that, okay, let's give it a shot, see if it works out. And we've been together for 16 years now, so I guess it's working. And I hope New York State keeps the spousal refusal. I hope they do, because that's one of my biggest fears, because I'm on Medicaid buy-in for working people, and it's been great because not only do I use it for my OPWDD services, such as care coordination, the self-direction program, but I use it for my long-term personal care. It pays for my long-term personal care that I need at home to get up to work and do what I do.
And being able to navigate, exactly, and being able to navigate, we talk about the benefit disincentive for work, But also, if you're not able to navigate those benefits that provide supports that allow people to work, that's a whole other sort of disincentive, is these benefits get confusing. What qualifies as a work-related impaired, like, how is your experience and your organization's experience been navigating some of those more intricate programs about what income counts, what doesn't?
Like I said, it's very confusing, and it takes a lot of time to give the appropriate information, and most of our information that we would send back would be go to a benefits advisor, go to them, ask them that question, and if you need support, take your care coordinator with you, because they'll most likely become educated with you, because the care coordinators that are coming in to the field today have a lot of other stuff to focus on. I'm sure they're not thinking about, I have to manage the Medicaid and the benefits too. Help them through that, because, you know, and you need a circle of support to guide you through that. Like, I have a great circle of support, and I'm grateful for them. Like, I don't always talk to my care coordinator. I talk to my circle of support first and say, should I do this? Should I not? Usually I take the opposite view of, if they say no, I'll do it anyway. But that's just me.
Awesome. Well, is there anything I didn't ask that you think is important for our audience to know?
Well, as I thought about what I was going to say as I concluded today, we need to stop, as people with disabilities, living our life in fear, and let the fear run our lives, because then we don't live the lives we want. We're living the lives that those who are telling us we shouldn't. We're leading their life, not the life that we want to. And sometimes dignity of risk is okay. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. Don't worry about not having. I know for me, there was a lot of fear, but I had to get past that fear and realize, if I wanted to have a better life, taking that risk and taking that jump actually turned it out being a great thing for me. And I hope this helps people who are experiencing that fear get over those feelings that they have and realize there are people out there that could help them. And if you have a independent living center in your area, wherever you're from, please go there, find the benefits and entitlement people from OPWDD and have them guide you through, and then make that informed decision, because informed decision making should be the way we live our lives, and not by the fear of what people are telling us.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much, and for your candor and your expertise in this topic. I'd now like to introduce our final panelist, James Traylor, president at Rivent Partners. His work focuses on financial planning for people with disabilities and their families, and he's a recognized leader in that field. Welcome, James. Let's jump right in and hear a little bit about what you do broadly.
Sure. So we have two sides to our business. We have a full service consulting firm where we help individuals with disabilities and their families maximize every single benefit they possibly can for their either family or situation, and then plan for long-term sustained independent living. So we get into the weeds on the utilization of trust, the maximization of resources, so that we're using public benefits as a tool, but it's not the only tool. We're understanding that there needs to be other resources outside of that to give an individual the disability choices. And the challenge is most people in my field that manage wealth, and we manage about $200 million, mainly in trusts and retirement accounts, they have no knowledge at all of these very robust public safety nets. And many people in the field then don't know or very uncomfortable talking about money. And you have to talk about money if you're going to be talking about things like Medicaid, Social Security, and so forth. So it's kind of, there's this awkward place that we we happily live in, because we can bridge those two worlds. And I've been doing that for about 17 years, both as a professional and as a family member as well. I have a sister with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
I am going to jump right into some technical questions because we've alluded to a lot of the sort of misinformation and some of the specific programs that are out there. You mentioned the last time we talked about there are some exciting changes to the Medicaid buy-in program for working people with disabilities and some pieces of it that people don't know about in New York. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so to kind of set the stage for your audience who may not be quite as familiar as how all these systems work, but Medicaid in New York State is the backbone of the majority of services that support individuals with disabilities, both the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, the New York State Department of Health, many of the home care benefits that BJ was alluding to. You could be eligible via the nature of your disability, but if you don't have Medicaid, you do not have a funding mechanism for that service delivery system. So you must concurrently maintain your Medicaid eligibility while also maintaining your status essentially as a person with a disability, which is impacted by a variety of factors. So there is a large cohort in New York State that is not categorically eligible for Medicaid via their SSI eligibility, and instead they get their Medicaid in either through their local Department of Social Services, or if they live in New York City or the boroughs, the New York City HRA. So for that cohort, there's this wonderful program we have in New York State called the New York State Medicaid Buy-in for Working Persons with Disabilities. From an advocacy standpoint, we should rename it because it's very confusing. It's neither a buy-in at the current moment, and it's a terrible acronym. Sorry for our elected officials out there. Terrible acronym, MBI-WPD. Doesn't even roll off. It's not like FBI. That sounds good. But at any rate, what it allows is it allows a person with a disability that to work, to earn, and then to save in excess amounts that would otherwise be allowable. So for example, whereas if someone is on Medicaid for a number of years, if they were on SSI, they could only save $2,000. If they were on the Medicaid buy-in up until this year, they could save $20,000, and that has since been increased to $30,182. And in 2025, unless the legislature changes the current position, what was passed in the governor's most recent budget, that is going up to upwards of $300,000. So it's a really big positive shift that would allow an individual with a disability to accumulate more resources. Now, when I'm referring to resources, these are things that are not what are called exempt resources. So the exempt resources that people have are things like a house, one house, a car. What we talked about in our last call was many people don't realize retirement accounts are an exempt resource. So since 2014, New York State has not recognized the value of a retirement account as an asset towards that either $20,000 or $30,000 number. So that creates a huge opportunity for anyone that wants to work that would find themselves in a position to perhaps get an employer matching contribution, whether it's BJ working at the state, that means his pension is not an asset for purposes of Medicaid. The New York State Deferred Compensation Plan, the 457 plan, would not be an asset. A 401k, an IRA, a simple IRA, a Roth IRA, all of them have unlimited balance thresholds. That also includes, because Medicaid does not delineate between inherited IRAs and accounts that are set up. So if you were to ask most people in the field, could a person with a disability have $1 million retirement account if they're on the Medicaid buy-in with working, the Medicaid buy-in program? I would find most people would answer no, and that answer is yes. And that is, from a system standpoint, a real problem.
And it does seem, I mean, I know that the SSI limit, that $2,000 limit that you mentioned, has not been updated since the 1980s.
That's right.
I actually don't think it's been updated in my lifetime, which is a little terrifying. Things do not cost what they cost in the 1980s. One of the things that I think is about this program is that it's closing a loophole. So a house is not an asset, but how do you save for a down payment for a house in order to purchase the house if you're only allowed to have $2,000 or even $20,000 or $30,000 these days is not going to be a 20% down payment on a house in many parts of New York State.
An excellent point. So there's a variety of different ways that you do it. The most recent tool is the expansion of the 529 college savings plan to the 529A, which is the Stephen Beck Achieving a Better Life Experience, or the ABLE Act. It allows an individual with a qualifying disability, which used to be occurred prior to 26, but it is since being expanded to an older cohort. And for many individuals that were born with either an intellectual or developmental disability or acquired a mental illness, say in their 20s, even if their diagnosis didn't occur later, but the disability was from an earlier point, they can still qualify. But that allows them to save, anyone to save to $17,000 a year, going to $18,000 next year. And if the individual is working, they may be able to save an additional $12,000 per year into that account. The balance of that account is exempt from both the SSI budgeting rules as well as the Medicaid rules. So it is not considered a resource towards that now $30,000 limit. So a person over a period of years would be able to qualify, for that. Another tool, some banks, especially as the mortgage landscape gets more and more challenging, had in previous years a matching program that an individual, if they were saving money earmarked specifically for the down payment or closing costs, the bank would match. And because that money was not held in the name of the individuals, or it wasn't in the name of the person with the disability, it was really more of a credit towards closing costs. It didn't count as either income or accountable resource for home ownership. So that is one mechanism that someone could use to get the down payment for a house.
It seems like the easy version of the rules are very straightforward and very restrictive, but that there are all of these other programs that exist that make the rules not exactly the rules. Are there other, pieces, are there other really common pieces of misinformation that you find yourself confronting when advising people?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just take the previous comment that you had for BJ about marriage, because BJ's comment, rightfully so, talked about the spousal refusal, or we refer to as spousal budgeting provision within New York State's version of Medicaid benefits. But one of the things that's challenging is the state is responsible for the interpretation of the guidance from CMS and can, through either a waiver process or in partnership with CMS, enforce or not enforce different provisions. But Social Security has its own standard that is separate and distinct from Medicaid. So in BJ's case, the act of getting married makes you ineligible now for dependent parent benefits that could have been paid off of a parent. So we've wrestled with this many times, that there is something called Title II of the Social Security Act, which is what Elizabeth was referring to is if someone has paid into the FICA program via their payroll tax. But there's another section that is disability benefits paid off of a parent, an adoptive parent, a step parent, a custodial parent, that it provides a sometimes more significant financial benefit for the individual disability. So for example, if a child was born with a disability like cerebral palsy and has not worked and maintained substantial gainful activity, and their parent becomes disabled, passes away, or files for their Social Security retirement benefits, and the child is unmarried, they would be eligible for 50% of that parent's benefit at full retirement, which is either 66 or 67. So in pure dollar amounts, that could be $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 per month. And many people don't know about it, and they don't realize that their decision through their circle of support could impact the availability of that benefit. So we should leave it to the individual with disability to make an informed decision. And unfortunately, people, whether it's in their individual circle or more broadly in the system, aren't familiar with how onset dates of disability impact things. So Elizabeth mentioned, when did your disability start? Well, we are huge proponents that if it's an intellectual or developmental disability, pulling out records that show that date occurred prior to 22. Because if it occurred prior to 22, you make yourself eligible for that benefit. But if you're simply just looking at, I want to help this person get on Social Security, and you're not thinking about perhaps a future benefit they may be eligible for, that age 22 is of no significance. So it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It's just you're not thinking about planning in the more holistic sense.
James, is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you want to highlight before we jump into the Q&A?
Yeah, maybe because I'm a sadist, I view this system as a game. And there are, New York State for, and a lot of people like to bash on New York. I'm a lifelong New Yorker. My father was in state government. New York State is one of the premier states to live in if you have an intellectual, developmental disability, a mental illness. And I realize it's frustrating to navigate these systems, but it's far more frustrating in states like Georgia or Alabama or Florida when they have no systems because their state tax revenues are so much lower. So you get what you pay for. So it is up to us as either family members or consumers to spend the time to attend these webinars to figure out how all these benefits fit together, because it's 1/3 of the New York State budget. It is a massive, massive service delivery system. The problem is there's not one single point of entry. So OPWDD references the front door, but that's really the front door for their world. There's a side door and a back door and a trap door, and you have to just figure out as an individual or as a family that I may be able to stack multiple layers of benefits on top of one another to get up to this critical mass of financial support so that I can live independently in the community if I'm unable to financially support myself. It just takes time, and it takes time like being able to get away in the middle of the day for a webinar, which may be a luxury for many of us. So I think—
And that's why it's recorded.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to open it up for questions. Again, please use that Q&A tool on the bottom of your Zoom. We've already got a couple coming in. Some are technical, some are not. I was asked about the expense of a job coach, and I'm going to expand that question a little bit to be, what is the role of a job coach, both as the expense of a job coach can be an impairment-related work expense, but also job coaches are people who are not generally trained benefits advisors, but are sort of part of this information ecosystem. So does anyone want to jump in and talk about job coaching, that role, how it fits into
Well,
SGA?
I have a job coach. I'll talk
Go for
about that a little bit. What my job coach does for me, since I have a lot of things, a lot of balls up in the air always, she keeps me on track to make sure I know where I'm supposed to be. So the schedule that I have to keep is color coded because I respond better when I see the color to kind of help me manage. Like if I need help with my my expense report for my state credit card, she helps me put that together. And she's paid through my self-direction plan. So that's what's great about self-direction now. The money for the services she provides comes directly out of my self-direction. So, and we don't really talk about benefits. Whenever I start to talk to her about benefits, she's like, talk to your care coordinator. So they really don't. Their focus is to help me keep and maintain the job. And if there are any issues, be the liaison between me and supervision. If I'm hot-headed, which most times I am when I have a point to make. So she keeps me cool and okay with things.
I can jump in, Leigh, with how a job coach potentially impacts
Perfect.
someone that's qualifying for Social Security disability or childhood disability benefits off of, say, a parent or grandparent. So we mentioned earlier, or Elizabeth did an excellent job talking about this thing called substantial gainful activity. So substantial gainful activity is the threshold that Social Security uses for Title II benefits, again, Social Security disability, childhood disability benefits, et cetera, that if you go over that number, which is currently $1,470 per month of gross W-2 wages, it is going to $1,550 per month of gross W-2 wages January 1st. But if you go over that limit, they define you as not having a disability anymore. I should say, not being disabled by the medical condition that you
Right,
have.
this
You
is
could still have a disability.
Yeah, this is SSA's functional definition of disability,
Correct.
which I'm sure many
not a
people are
medical
familiar with,
definition of a
but
disability.
but yes. To have a
So
functional definition of disability means it has to impact your ability to earn a living.
exactly, and that's their threshold. So even if someone, so take BJ's case, even if someone is not actually paying personally their job coach, the cost of that job coach is viewed as essentially a workplace accommodation, or this thing called an impairment related work expense. So let's just use a very simple example. If the threshold is $1,470 and I look at the billing invoice on my fiscal intermediary statement for self-direction that shows my job coach is getting $500 per month, not from me, but from Medicaid via self-direction, that $500 charge can be reported to Social Security as an impairment-related work expense. Again, even though I'm not paying it, it then creates an additional $500 above substantial gainful activity that now I could work. So now instead of $1,470, now I'm at $1,970. And there are a variety of other things, medical expenses, medical premiums, co-pays, transportation costs, durable medical equipment, community habilitation, personal care needs, all of those costs can be aggregated to give someone a significantly higher threshold in which they could work. So we have some clients that are making 40, 50, 60,000 a year with a disability, and under these rules, they are under substantial gainful activity because of the accommodations. People need to know that.
Absolutely. And that is something we do cover in our brief, not exactly to that extent, but so if people are interested, we will drop the information on our brief and anything else that the panelists want to share, which will be attached to the recording. We also had some questions about medical insurance reimbursement in general, and we've talked about Medicaid almost exclusively as the source of healthcare. Are there folks who have you had to navigate other forms of insurance other than Medicaid, be it private, and how does that interact?
Happy to take that one as well, unless someone else wants to jump in. So there is a federal law called the Coordination of Benefits, and it helps insurance companies, whether it's from a system standpoint or the private landscape or the public marketplaces, to simply understand who is a primary insured, who's a secondary insured, who's a tertiary insured. So for many of the individuals either on the call or participating, many of them are eligible for Medicaid. So Medicaid is a program that is both the mechanism that we use to fund many of the adult-based supports and services in New York State, but it is also a health insurance program. And it is impossible to divorce the supports and services from the fact that it is a health insurance program. So because of that, based on someone's decision to work, they may also find themselves interacting with other health insurance programs throughout the process of working. So if someone is an SSDI or childhood disability recipient, after 24 consecutive months on that benefit, they will be automatically enrolled in Medicare. If someone is then employed and has access to a workplace retirement plan, workplace health insurance plan or commercial insurance plan, or by the nature of their disability is eligible for private insurance through perhaps their parent, the way it works is private insurance is almost always considered primary, followed by federally funded insurance, which would be Medicare, followed by Medicaid as the payer of last resort. If someone only has Medicare and Medicaid, then it is still Medicare primary, Medicaid secondary. I think someone referred to healthcare reimbursement. So if someone is not eligible for Medicare, but has private insurance and Medicaid, Medicaid is acting as a secondary insurance, so it could pick up the cost of copays, deductibles, coinsurance, et cetera. So many people not realizing that, fail to tell their medical professionals and their pharmacy benefits or the hospital that they have 2 insurance plans. So that's very important. But if the county determines that the cost of the commercial health insurance program is cost effective, it saves the Medicaid program money by maintaining that primary insured slot, Medicaid may pay the cost of that private insurance on a monthly tax-free reimbursement basis, whether that commercial insurance is funded by the employee themselves or perhaps a parent. So by way of example, if I'm a teacher, if I'm in state government, okay, and I have the CDPHP group health insurance plan, and that is a copay insurance plan, and I have a child who is eligible for Medicaid, Medicaid may choose to pay the cost of my premium, even though I don't have a disability, but just the individual disability is covered under that plan. So it's a very complicated landscape. And back from a systems advocacy standpoint, we don't train care coordinators and job coaches to necessarily know how to navigate insurance-based benefits because that's outside their scope. I happen to have an insurance license.
And there are so many different iterations of what exactly that looks like. Kellie, I also want to throw this question at you a little bit because as an employer, you do provide benefits to your clients who many of which are not eligible for Medicaid for long periods of time. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
We do provide, the opportunity to purchase health insurance through our agency. However, it stinks. It's a technical term. It's horrible for a single person. It's like $670 a month with a $6,700 deductible. So it's, I mean, the prevailing wage and the jobs that NYSID provide us are amazing, but we don't have people who sign up for it. I think as an agency, we have 5 individuals signed up for that plan. So we really help people navigate the New York State, the whatever it's called, I forgot what it's called. The New York
Marketplace
Exchange. Thank you.
Yeah, Marketplace Exchange.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it's terrible as an employer not to be able to say, let's cover everybody's health insurance. But we haven't been able to, even as a large group. So we have 114 employees. 93% of them are all people with disability. And I can't just say, let's pay for everybody's health insurance, which is what we really need access. Can I just throw out dental care? I want to throw out dental care. So we do have a program that's much less expensive for the Delta Dental, and substance use disorder does horrible damage to people's mouths. So we have, just as an agency, we've made a connection with a couple of local dentists and a dental surgeon. So we're starting to send people, and we're going to be starting to beg for money because there's not even a place in any kind of governmental system that will help people actually repair their mouth. They'll pull out everybody's teeth. They'll pull out everybody's teeth. So people are walking around with no teeth in their mouth. They don't feel confident in smiling. They can't eat. I mean, it affects everybody's health. And there's just no way, there's no mechanism in state government or local government to actually pay for this dental program that we're trying to push out. And I believe the issue.
I believe we are down to, I think there's one dentist that takes Medicaid in the capital region and beyond.
Yes.
I believe we are just down to one.
But they're not going to give a 30-year-old male or female the long-term posts that, the ones that go into the permanent fix. They're going to give you dentures at 30 years old, and then pull the rest of the teeth out of your mouth, which is not dental care. That's
isn't great. It is neither good for healthcare nor for employment. Let's be honest. Right. So I have a couple questions about DAC benefit eligibilities? And who is eligible for DAC benefits, and how do we as an agency support go about, who wants to talk about DAC benefits?
You want that, Elizabeth? You want me to take it?
Oh, yeah, so the just wanted to say that the DAC benefits is actually what James was referring to earlier. It is also called the disabled adult child benefit. So just wanted to pop in and say that this was the other one, but James, take it away.
So it's an important delineation. So childhood disability benefits are a benefit where an individual with a disability is eligible off of a parent's record as long as the disability occurred prior to age 22, the child has not engaged in substantial gainful activity, and is unmarried. What DAC status is, or DAC as it's referred to by a Social Security official, is someone who is previously eligible for SSI benefits and has lost those SSI benefits not by virtue of their own wages or financial situation, simply by virtue of becoming eligible for childhood disability benefits off of their parent. So the term DAC means it's a special carve out that allows someone that used to be eligible for SSI to no longer be eligible for SSI by virtue of the higher benefit they're going to get off of their parent. But Social Security keeps their SSI file open. So the benefit is reduced to zero, but the file stays open. Now, the only reason they would do that is because that then keeps their authorization for Medicaid at the federal level and does not require that individual to necessarily need to qualify through the local Department of Social Services, again, in New York City HRA. So the advantage of that was there used to be many people that as soon as their parent retired, if their parent died, they would lose SSI, which means they'd lose their Medicaid, and that was a problem. Now, the situation has changed a little bit in New York State because the income threshold to maintain your Medicaid has gone up substantially. It's gone up by about $700 per month. So whereas someone may have lost their Medicaid prior, now they may not. So, but ultimately, to answer the question, that's what DAC is. It's someone who had SSI, lost SSI due to the benefit off of a parent, but still needs to maintain their Medicaid at the federal level. So SSI goes to zero, but their authorization for Medicaid stays at the federal level. So they won't recertify at the local level.
So what is the process for when that happens? Is it automatic? Is it a reapplication?
Leigh, nothing is automatic with Social Security. Come on. So at the point of someone filing a Social Security benefit, which could be someone filing a survivor benefit, could be someone filing simply a retirement benefit or a disability, there is a question, whether you do it online or you do it at the local office, they will ask the question, do you have a family member, an immediate family member with a disability? So that is supposed to, emphasis on supposed to, prompt a feedback loop where the local field office will follow up with the claimant to then do an adult disability report and see if the child is then eligible for benefits off of the parent's record. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So if someone's gone 3 or 4 months and they've not received that phone call, it is absolutely their right to call the local Social Security field office and request that they explore childhood disability or in certain cases, DAC eligibility. We have found in our business, many local Social Security field officials will tell someone they're not eligible if they're over 16, which is wrong. And so there can even be misinformation at the local Social Security field office, but that is the mechanism. It's not something, unfortunately, you can do online. It is something that requires either a paper application or an interview. And then the one step after that is either Social Security will follow up and verify the person's medical status, or in New York State, we have Social Security has a subcontract with the New York State Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance to also do disability reviews on behalf of the Social Security system. So in New York, it could be either Social Security or it could be the OTDA.
I do want to just say that this is why it's so important to work with your local business or agency or independent living center. As my independent living center, we are certified to do the vulnerable population application, SSI application process, which is on paper. And I had an experience where I sat with someone who was recently released from a long-term incarceration, did a paper application, which is 56 pages, sent it off to Social Security. Us here at SAIL, we're very well connected with our local field office. The person who reviews the VPAP SSI applications called me personally, identified the application as someone who'd be eligible for these DAC or childhood disability benefits, reach out to me to reach out to the person that I assisted with. And while the cogs of bureaucracy are always do turn slow, this happened within 2 weeks. So it is very important for people who are interested in filing for benefits. They're not alone in this process. And it is really important to reach out to us who are here knowledgeable to help, because we were able to identify this wonderful benefit in a rapid time.
I think this discussion also segues really well into our next question, because I'm sure people at home are going, I'm sorry, an application on paper, like in the 90s?
Yes.
Given how complicated this process is, given how much back and forth there is, is there a role for technology to make some of this simpler? Whether that be, clearly some kind of better online filing system like we have for taxes and college applications. But I know this is getting brought up a lot in other spaces. Is there a role potentially for something like an AI tool to navigate some of these, or at least the first step in some of these overlapping benefits?
I can't speak to the AI tool of it all. However, I assist people in filing for disability benefits 99 times out of 100 online. So it is that more simple, streamlined process. It is that very specific vulnerable population application process, which is only for SSI, that is done on paper, and that is those applications are processed in a specific way that Social Security does prefer to be on paper. However, that while a regular disability application is filed online, everything after is then on paper, which can be, in this day and age, very, very frustrating and feeling very, very outdated.
Now, does that include like the wage reporting? How's that generally done?
Wage reporting is done a few ways, and unfortunately my favorite is the most outdated. Wage reporting can be done through someone's My Social Security account. Social Security does have a wage reporting tool for SSI beneficiaries only. It's an app right in the Apple Store. You could also call the local office, go there and drop off your pay stubs every month. But like I said, my favorite way is the most outdated, which is faxing. Why is it my favorite? Because that is the only method that gives you a confirmation that pay stubs were sent. So when I meet with someone to report their wages, I fax over the IRWs, the pay stubs, what have you. I give them the fax confirmation page and I put it in a folder labeled November 2023, and I tell them to throw it in their bin and keep it, because Social Security always likes to say that they may not have gotten something. And so if an overpayment occurs, that fax confirmation is the only proof that we have that we did report those wages for those months.
Let's actually talk a little bit more about overpayment and the sort of threat of overpayment. I'm surprised this actually hasn't come up yet, but during our conversations with a number of folks leading up to this webinar, a lot of people expressed that they were unwilling to change their work hours, work more, because of the fear that Social Security would overpay them. They'd be forced to pay it back. They could get sued by the Social Security Administration, a thing that has actually happened more than once. How is some of that, reluctance to change? How does that show up due to like systematic factors, like the way we report wages to SSA?
So there's a couple, I think, building on connecting both those questions. So Elizabeth brought up the SSI mobile wage reporting app, which is a great tool. It only works if you have one job. If you have two jobs, you can't use the tool. that is a systems problem. That is a simple systems problem. The online wage reporting tool on the Social Security disability side doesn't allow for the online reporting of the impairment related work expenses or an enhanced or proactive filing of the work activity report, the SSA 821BK. So we have this just silly system where there's a little bit of technology that's super antiquated, and people in the field, I share, Elizabeth, your philosophy, we fax everything because we need that proof, and they routinely lose it. And it makes sense. There's trillions of dollars floating around, but I have to imagine there's some really smart people that could make this simpler, especially when you think of who else reports wages, the employer on a Form 941 quarterly reports and pays their FICA tax. So why is it that we're asking someone who may not have access to a computer, may not be financially literate, to then be doing this when they have the data themselves? And to your question, Leigh, that's when this comes up, because Social Security gets the data from the Social Security wage reporting from the employer. And if they see there's not a corresponding submission, that can result in an overpayment. And now they're going down the rabbit hole of fear and a notice of claim and all of these things that technology could surely, this is simple math and verification of wages and dates.
And I know we do have that as I've actually worked with DOL, and I have seen the unemployment data acquisition that they have. And yeah, it seems like they already know what everyone's wages are.
That is the biggest thing that people say, is that they should know in today's day and age.
I think the only exception would be, and many people in the disability space may not be able to maintain that traditional 9-to-5 job. So if they're in a self-employment situation or they're starting a business, I think that's an exception, because Social Security views the concept of substantial gainful activity as a little bit more antiquated, in that it is a traditional W-2 worker. It doesn't take into account kind of the gig economy or side hustles, if you will, or other ways that people with disabilities may be acquiring wages. You know, when you're doing it through self-employment, they look at your net income, not just your gross income, the way they would if you're working. So if I'm coming up with a dog collar leather business, and this is a real example, I may have made $3,000 this month, but I put in 40 hours of work. I acquired leather and a sewing machine and rhinestones and all these different things for the collar. And all of those expenses can be deducted then from my gross income. So the amount that I report to Social Security is the net amount. But again, does a job coach understand self-employment? Probably not, because they're more embedded in a more traditional employment situation like what BJ has with a large employer. You know, OPWD is a state agency. So that's a more traditional employee relationship. And we just don't make it easy for people to report.
I think that also brings up another barrier to employment that results from benefits, which is it's very easy to know exactly what benefits you are entitled to based on how much you make if you have a consistent and predictable source of income, right? If you're making the same every month, if you're, me with my W-2 job, I know exactly to the penny what I have every month. That is not always true if you have a non-traditional job, or if you have a job that has variation in hours. Are there tools to sort of deal with unpredictable income? I'm guessing your self-employed client with the dog collar business probably does a lot more business in November and December than in other parts of the year. Are there protections? Are there ways to, manage a more unpredictable or a more up and down income?
Elizabeth, do you want to talk on how the difference between SSI and SSD in terms of the month of receipt of the income versus the month that was earned, and then how potentially it can be averaged?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of discussion about earnings and with receiving Social Security disability, and those rules are vastly different than what it is for supplemental security income. Unfortunately, if someone who is working and on SSI, there's a direct impact on benefits. So Social Security very kindly does not count the first $85 of earned income. After that, for every $2 a person makes, their benefit is therein reduced by $1. So there is that direct 2-to-1 ratio of earned income to reduced benefits, which can leave people feeling very, very unsettled when, you know, they've worked so hard to get these benefits, they've worked so hard to get their SNAP, HEAP, all of those other things settled, and then, you know, they go to work for a few hours a week and they see immediate dramatic decrease in their benefits. And then something that's also important to recognize is the time where you work versus reporting versus when benefits are being seen. So someone who works in October reports their wages in November, but then the reflection of their benefits is not seen until December. So to go back to what we're talking about with the people who are working different hours inconsistently, you could work and earn $500 in October and see that reduction in December, but it's okay. December is your busy month, so you're earning more money from your job. But then come February,
It's the exact opposite.
it's the exact opposite. So it can be very, very scary for people to think about long-term financial planning, even short-term financial planning in 3 months, when job hours, especially just retail, can be so inconsistent with holidays and slow times and everything like that.
We had brought up in one of our precursor discussions to the brief was planning around the 3-paycheck month for SSI. In New York, we generally pay biweekly. That's what the government does. That's what most private groups do. And so 2 months of the year, due to there being 52 weeks in the year, you end up with 3 paychecks in a month, which could add 50% onto your income for that month if it's not managed, and then show up as a lower SSI payment later, even though you are working the same, making the same hourly, which feels like something that should be easy to solve and yet has not been. For our last few minutes, I'd like to open it. Please continue to send questions. There have been some really excellent ones. Oh, actually, let's start here. What's the difference between Medicaid and Medicare?
So Medicare is the federal health insurance program that all of us pay into via the Medicare tax. That is for Part A. Part B is something that replaces kind of commercial workplace insurance after someone turns age 65 or has been disabled for 2 years. And there's some other parts that we're not going to get into in this presentation. Medicaid is the health insurance program for people at or below the federal poverty level that have a qualifying disability that is either chronic or is going to extend more than 13 months, or through the expanded Medicaid program, people still refer to it as Obamacare. There's a separate cohort where they're able to get health insurance if they're in that place where their employer either offers it, as Kellie did, but it's really expensive and not that great. They could go on and potentially, through their income, qualify for Medicaid through the state of New York. Medicaid, though, also is the tool that we use to fund all programs, and I shouldn't say all, but most either community or chronic care programs. So anything funded through the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities, you know, the Department of Health is often going to be a Medicaid type program. So you must maintain Medicaid to both get your health insurance, but also fund that program. Whereas Medicare is just health insurance for either those that are disabled, on SSDI, or 65 or older.
Yes, I remember when my parents were picking out their Part B plans. So for the last couple minutes, I do want to open it up for the panelists. If you have questions for each other in particular, I know that this has been I have really enjoyed this discussion. I have learned new things. I love moderating discussions like this. Is there anything you guys have to ask for each other or clarification?
I would say it's more of a statement. You know, BJ, when I was chair of the Governor's Developmental Disability Planning Council, and we were funding, you know, some issues on employment, you know, it came up in our discussion. Why don't we look at the New York State civil service system and how they take on individuals with disabilities and find perhaps a different path to, you know, to employment for individuals with disabilities? Because for many of them, by not necessarily having that GED or traditional diploma, the regular civil service path may be unavailable. And yes, to your point, they may get an interview, but do they really get a job? And you know, I would love for you and your advocacy, both at SANES and within OPWD, to have hopefully someone pay attention to that.
Believe me, James, I would like to know that somebody is going to follow after me, because I'm already looking forward to the day when I retire, but I would like there to be someone after me, and I would like for OPWDD and other employers who are going to employ people with disabilities to be advocates within their organization, to really think about a succession plan, because advocacy, even though it's at the state level within OPWDD, which can be very difficult because you have to wade through a lot of regulation and a lot of stuff, but it's important to say, nope, you're not doing the right thing. Let's talk about it. And
I would like to
that's my word.
And I would like to highlight that there is a civil service entry program for people with disabilities and for veterans with disabilities within New York State for the civil service. This is the 55B program,
Yep.
which basically is a exclusion from the initial open access civil service test for people with disabilities, and 55C, which is particular to veterans with disabilities. Rockefeller actually did a report on the utilization of these programs last year, 2 years ago, I think last year. And the 55B program, these does have a limitation of spots. And the program has actually been expanded where they have increased the slots. And hopefully they are tracking how people move from these initial positions, these entry-level positions within state government, into and through promotional exams and MC, which I think is tracked a little bit less because those are not under civil services purview.
Well, Leigh, it's fine to have slots, but let's make sure they're not token positions, okay?
Exactly. And I think that tracking those promotional exams past the open entry is really crucial going forwards.
You know, what I've wondered just on the 55B and C is why the state doesn't have NYSID oversee that program. Because NYSID does all of the reporting, you know, they do the QERs and they're keeping track of the wages. I mean, that would be a great niche for NYSID to manage on behalf of New York State.
I have no idea why they are not related to each other. I know that civil service has to administer the program because it does pertain to the exams which they administer, but there's no reason why, you know, there shouldn't be more partnership and more back and forth between those organizations, both of which I've worked with very successfully, and both care substantially about both employment and about making sure they do the right research to see if their programs are working.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts from our panelists?
I just want to thank you for asking all of us to be involved today, but also thanking my fellow panelists. It's nice to know that we're here to help, and it's nice to know that there are other agencies, other people, businesses who are out there to all, at the end of the day, do the same thing, which is help people with disabilities understand and fight for what they deserve and their benefits that they need.
And I would just add, I saw Michael C. Ryder's question in the comments about the role of technology. This area in particular, when we're thinking about paper applications, data entry, you know, it is so ripe for this amazing technology that is coming out that could make this whole process so much simpler. And it'd be great if the Developmental Disability Planning Council, you know, the Alliance and so forth might be able to find places where some pilot grants could work to test out, can we, at least on the state side, because we can't do things necessarily with our federal funders, but on the state side, can we embed technology to maybe make reporting simpler and easier for individuals who may struggle with the technology reporting that is on this antiquated system at DSS? You know, there's got to be an easier way with AI.
Great. Well, I would like to thank you all so much for being here today. I think this was an incredibly informative conversation. We will be posting the recording on YouTube, and we will try to include any resources that have been asked for in the notes for that. Again, we have 2 more webinars this year. One is on, I've lost all my notes. One is on November 13th, which is about the cost of paperwork. So we're going to be talking about trying to reduce programs that try to reduce some of the administrative burden associated with participating in these programs, changes in work. And then we're going to be talking about the information ecosystem on December 1st, and employment supports and all of the folks who work with people with disabilities and the resources that they provide. So again, thank you so much. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Maureen and Michael, and enjoy the rest of your sunny Friday in New York.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.